Okay, so I'm going to give one definition of boundaries today. There are many ways to define boundaries, many ways to define boundaries and look at boundaries. And today I'll just give one definition. And boundaries are inherently difficult to define. And one reason is because life is an illusion. And you are an illusion, and you don't really exist. So that is one reason why it can be a little bit hard to define what boundaries are, especially when it comes to a personage. Having said that, I personally like to look at boundaries this way. I think it's relatively clear cut depending on, depending on lots of things. But anyway, so I believe that you have a true self. Your true self might be really hard for you to access and actually might be really scary for your ego to get to know. Because most likely your true self is almost the polar opposite to your false self. Your false self definitely being your ego. So when you're young, you were traumatized in some kind of way. And as a result, you started to develop an ego. And this ego was your front-facing persona that your parents would approve of and society would approve of. And over time, you got lost in this ego. You started to think that this is who you were. And sometimes you can get really confused in terms of your boundaries this way because you think that your ego's boundaries are your boundaries, but they're not. Your ego's boundaries most likely go against your own boundaries. So you might be doing like a shit job of taking care of your own boundaries if you're highly in your ego. This is just the case. If you're also highly in your ego, it's probably hard for you to deal with other people's boundaries. You're bad at your own boundaries, let alone other people's boundaries on top of that. So consent is going to be really hard. That's a little bit besides the point. Okay, so your true self is, in my opinion, your home frequency, the frequency that only you uniquely are on this earth. No one else has this frequency, and it's your job, it's your spiritual mission to anchor this frequency here on earth so that it's available to everyone. I honestly think that this is everyone's spiritual mission. Yes, everyone has a spiritual mission. It's just to be yourself. But being yourself is sometimes difficult if you got lost in your ego and you're being your false self instead. So most people will not take the journey necessary in order to meet their true selves. This is an intense kind of hero's journey, Joseph Campbell type myth thing, where you have to die and be reborn. Almost anyone will fight tooth and nail, and they don't want to be this die and reborn thing. No, thank you, in which case you'll never meet your true self. And most people are not doing their spiritual missions. And that's that. Anyway, if you're paying attention to your ego's boundaries, you're most likely violating your own boundaries. Your ego, you can see it almost like a parasite on your system. It thrives and lives off of your life force energy when it inherently has no life force energy. Your ego has no life force energy, your body does. So your ego lives like a parasite on your body, whereas your true self lives in your shadow. It's deeply hidden somewhere in your unconscious. And when you meet your true self, you're going to know, because it's going to feel right. It's going to feel true. And it may feel kind of scary to get there. But once you're there, most likely you're going to feel a deep sense of peace. It's going to be maybe the best feeling you've ever had to be your true self, to know your true self. And in many respects, your true self is a frequency. So are you being this frequency? Are you living this frequency? Are you enhancing this frequency through your lifestyle? And that can mean living in a certain environment or eating certain kinds of foods or surrounding yourself with certain kinds of people. But are you feeding this frequency, or are you canceling this frequency out? And unfortunately, most people are canceling their own frequencies out by being their false selves. So to me, your boundary has something. Who are you? What is your boundary? To me, it has everything to do with, are you protecting your true self, or are you destroying your true self? And obviously, you cannot know what your boundaries are if you don't even know what your true self is. I heard one Vedic astrologer talking about this in terms of knowing what your sun is. If you know what your sun is, then you can just be it. And if you don't know what your sun is, then go find it. He makes it seem pretty simple, but I can attest to the fact that based on my personal experience and what I've seen in other people, that finding your true self can be the biggest life's mystery. And most people don't necessarily feel like they're in their full power, And what does that mean? Well, you're probably going to feel like you're in your full power if you are your true self. Okay, so that's one definition of boundaries. I'll give a different definition some other time. Bye.